everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the historic 2026 Ankara Summit. We are looking at what is, without a doubt, the single most unprecedented juncture in NATO's 77-year history. I mean, this isn't just your standard diplomatic handshake photo op. This is a monumental pivot point for global security. Just to give you an idea of the stakes, the summit is locked down by a massive force of 56,000 security personnel. So let's just get right into it. The alliance is currently being pushed to its absolute breaking point. We're talking about a brutal convergence of high-intensity warfare, some really shocking internal ruptures, and a massive top-to-bottom structural transition all happening at once. And you might be wondering, why does this matter to us? Well, the entire security architecture of the Western world and the global economic stability that completely relies on it is fundamentally shifting right before our eyes. The decisions they're hashing out in Ankara, they're going to dictate our geopolitical reality for decades to come. To untangle all this chaos, here's how we're going to break this down today. We'll start with the 2026 stress test itself. Look at the wars raging on multiple fronts. Examine that wild Greenland sovereignty dispute. Break down the staggering new 5% target, and finally, explore what everyone's calling NATO 3.0. All right, kicking things off with part one, the 2026 stress test in Ankara, which leads us right into the external pressures. Section 2, wars on multiple fronts. Right now, the alliance is being stretched to its absolute diplomatic and military limits by two vastly different conflicts. Over on the eastern flank, the war in Ukraine is officially entering its 5th year as a frozen, grinding battlefield. And with the US having halted its military support there to focus its resources elsewhere, Europe has had to step up in a huge way, with a €70 billion aid package just to keep Ukraine in the fight. But then you look over at the southern flank, and things are escalating incredibly fast. The US-Iran war, which the US dubbed Operation Epic Fury when it kicked off in February 2026, is shaking up the globe. Iranian naval blockades have effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz. That's disrupting 20% of the world's oil supply, sending global energy markets into a total tailspin. And because the US actually initiated that Iran conflict without consulting NATO first, we're seeing a fascinating shift in response. Several European allies are choosing to form an independent, defensive, multinational military mission rather than directly joining the US combat operations. Look at the breakdown here. France is leading power projection with the Charles de Gaulle carrier. The UK is deploying the HMS Dragon for advanced air defense, and Belgium is stepping in with vital mine countermeasures. It's a really stark example of Europe trying to carve out its own strategic autonomy to secure global energy choke points. Moving on to Section 3, the Greenland sovereignty disputes. Now, as crazy as those external wars are, they honestly pale in comparison to the shocking internal fractures we're seeing. Analysts are calling this new stance a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, basically the US treating the Arctic as its exclusive sphere of influence. In a completely unprecedented move, the US administration threatened military force to annex the autonomous Danish territory of Greenland. Denmark's reaction? They immediately deployed elite Arctic warfare soldiers in a defensive posture and declared, right alongside their European partners, that Greenland is not for sale. I mean, this is a crisis where one founding NATO member is effectively treating another as a primary national security threat. It is the ultimate test of the Article 5 Mutual Defense Guarantee. And frankly, the Greenland dispute isn't the only crack in the foundation right now. Domestic frictions are making it incredibly tough for the alliance to project a united front. Take the Czech Republic, for instance. A fierce constitutional clash between President Pavel and Prime Minister Babiš got so bad that they arrived in Ankara as a divided delegation on literally separate aircraft. Think about that. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, they recently announced a £15 billion defense boost, but that actually falls £28 billion short of what their military chiefs explicitly requested. So you have to ask serious questions about whether they can actually sustain their force modernization. Which brings us to the money. Section 4, the 5% target. 5%. Just take a second to process that number. Allies have committed to spending a staggering 5% of their gross domestic product on defense by 2035. This monumental financial agreement is known as the Hague Commitment, and it has already triggered a 20% real-term increase in European defense spending from last year. To put that into perspective, this is the single largest annual defense hike the world has seen since 1953. Let's break down these projections to see who is actually stepping up to meet this massive new baseline. Poland is absolutely leading the charge here, expected to hit 5.1%. The US is sitting at 3.6%. But the real game changer on this list is Germany. Projected to hit 2.5%, they are fundamentally rewriting their historic defense posture. They are transforming into Europe's leading supportive power, which really signals a completely new era of German military responsibility, especially along the eastern flank. Now, we have to look at how that 5% is actually divided up. It's 3.5% for core defense and 1.5% for something they call resilience. The crucial sticking point in Ankara right now is defining exactly what counts as resilience. They are hashing out strict rules for this. It covers protecting critical infrastructure like seaports and pipelines, subsidizing ammunition plants to expand the defense industry, modernizing roads and rails so militaries can actually move equipment quickly, and boosting cyber and space defenses. Why are they being so strict about this definition? Because if they aren't, nations could totally cheat the system. They might just reclassify everyday civil projects, like building a standard highway, as defense spending to hit their quotas, which obviously wouldn't help the alliance's actual military power at all. Okay, moving to our final section, building NATO 3.0. Because all this money, all these new capabilities, are ultimately feeding into one massive strategic realignment. If you look at the timeline here, NATO 1.0 from 1949 to 1991 was all about containing the Soviet Union, while America held absolute military supremacy. Then came NATO 2.0, the post-Cold War era, where they acted as a global expeditionary force for out-of-area stability. But today, we are officially in the era of NATO 3.0. This is defined by aggressive burden shifting. European nations absolutely must step up to provide conventional leadership and secure their own continent, because the automatic expectation of an American conventional backstop is gone. So this creates a stark new division of labor. Under the NATO 3.0 model, Europe takes on the role of the first responder. They're tasked with supplying the combat-ready, rapid deployment forces right along their own borders. The United States, meanwhile, is pivoting its primary focus toward the Indo-Pacific, acting as the strategic anchor for NATO. In this anchor role, the US provides the high-end stuff, things like heavy airlift, advanced intelligence, and, of course, the ultimate nuclear deterrence umbrella. And speaking of those high-end capabilities, the US is using the Ankara Summit to formally introduce a technological leap that sounds like science fiction, but it's very real. The Golden Dome for America. This isn't just your standard Patriot missile battery. It's an immense, multi-layered system that uses a constellation of thousands of AI-enabled satellites and space-based interceptors. It's designed to literally defeat large-scale salvos from pure-level adversaries. The scale of this network is just incredible, and the US is putting heavy pressure on its European allies to rapidly modernize their own systems so they can plug directly into this massive orbital command network. Now, amidst all these massive strategic shifts, we absolutely cannot overlook the host nation itself. Turkey is brilliantly leveraging the summit to cement its role as the indispensable strategic mediator. Just look at the multi-vector diplomacy they've got on display here. They're hosting the Syrian transitional president, Ahmad al-Shara. They're facilitating crucial meetings with Ukraine's President Zelensky. They're mediating the Black Sea Grain Initiative to keep global food supplies moving. And on top of all that, they're using a massive side forum to showcase their own domestic defense industrial revolution. Turkey has effectively positioned itself as the vital bridge between European security on one side and Middle Eastern instability on the other. So, what does this all mean? That brings us to the ultimate question facing the transatlantic alliance as the Ankara Summit wraps up. We are watching an organization try to completely reinvent its core structure, all while simultaneously managing active global wars, massive economic blockades, and fierce internal disputes over territory and budgets. So, can NATO 3.0 actually survive its greatest stress test? Will this historic shift toward European conventional leadership be the thing that saves the alliance, or will these intense internal pressures ultimately break it apart? That is the billion-dollar question that the next few years will answer. Thanks for learning with us today on This Explainer, and we'll catch you next time.